Hey, juniors, welcome back to what is beginning to get to be the closing of the book. In fact, we hit the real big thing after the death of Myrtle. We get the next big event here, and then we're going to definitely be on the downswing for chapter 9. So, chapter 8, this is going to be a big chapter, although it may not be the longest chapter, but man, there's a lot that happens, okay? So, we left off in chapter 7 with Gatsby just heartbroken at this point because it seems like everything he's wanted is slipping away right in front of him. Apologies for the coffee drinking. Everything seems to be slipping away. I mean, he's wanted so long to get Daisy. He got Daisy. And then in a matter of a few minutes, she goes back to Tom. And while Daisy's while Gatsby's still kind of hoping that's going to change, the fact is that he waits all night. Because when we left the last chapter, he was like hanging out in the bushes outside of Daisy's house. And throughout the night, at no point does she ever come out and see him. In fact, eventually the lights just go off, and that's kind of the it's over moment. All right. So Nick shows up to see Gatsby the next day, and look at how they describe Gatsby's house. You know, we watched the video. Actually, the day I'm filming this is the same day we watched the video from chapter 3, or not. We watched a clip from chapter 3 with Gatsby's house and how it was lit up and vibrant and everything was going on. Well, now listen to this. It says his house had never seemed so enormous to me as it did that night when we hunted through the great room for cigarettes. We pushed aside curtains that were like pavilions and felt over innumerable feet of dark wall for electric light switches. Once I tumbled with a sort of splash upon the keys of a ghostly piano. There was an inexplicable amount of dust everywhere, and the rooms were musty, as though they hadn't been aired for many days. I found the humidor on an unfamiliar table with 2 stale, dry cigarettes inside. Throwing open the French windows of the drawing room, we sat smoking out into the darkness. Look at that imagery versus what we saw earlier. And this is the thing you guys want to start being good at doing, is picking up things like this. It's looking for differences, for contrasts. And we see the house is bright and beautiful and vibrant, and now it's empty and dusty and dark. I mean, and so what could that be important about? It's representing Gatsby. You know, Gatsby's soul before is this vibrant, vivacious, excited thing, and now it's just closeted, it's shuttered, there's nothing there. And even the description of Gatsby, he's starting to almost look and just be described as the same words we would use to describe another character, George Wilson. He's starting to sound and feel like that. The broken down, barely hanging on to hope, dead dream George Wilson is kind of like Gatsby right now. All right. We get a little bit more background into Daisy and Gatsby's relationship, and this is a great thing to do on Fitzgerald's part. He could have given us all of these details earlier the first time he mentioned this, but he chooses to wait because too much background at one time bores modern readers. Plus, this allows you to, get the details out of their background that you need now versus getting all of them at once and having to, rely on readers to remember stuff, which we don't do, sadly. All right. So, all right, page 149 particularly. We get this is okay. So let's talk a little about this relationship. It's talking about when Daisy and Gatsby first meet, and Gatsby's not really truthful about who he is. It says he had deliberately given Daisy a sense of security. He let her believe he was a person from much the same stratum as herself, that he was fully able to take care of her. As a matter of fact, he had no such facilities. He had no comfortable family standing behind him, and he was liable at the whim of an impersonal government to be blown anywhere around the world. So he makes her think, yeah, I'm from wealthy family and I can take care of you. But the fact is he can't. He can't back up what he's saying. And then eventually he's going to have to deal with that. Let me read this last part. This is kind of cool because we're going to need it. It says Gatsby was overwhelmingly aware of the youth and mystery that wealth imprisons and preserves, of the freshness of many clothes and of Daisy's gleaming like silver, safe and proud above the hot struggles of the poor. Notice he says that wealth does 2 things. It imprisons and preserves. Those aren't synonyms. So, but the word imprisons is particularly key. Way back earlier, we talked about how, wealth provides freedom, but it also gives you chains. And that's what he's kind of noticing here because he knows that Daisy can't be with him. All right. Daisy seems to, though, when Gatsby goes to talk to her about this and come clean, she seems to, at this point, accept Gatsby as the penniless person he is. But that's because at this point she's young, and it's the whole image of romanticism, of, she a love at first sight, and we're going to be just fine even if we don't have a nickel. We're going to be happy because we're in love. That kind of stuff that, no offense, just doesn't hold up. um, so she's just not being practical. And again, remember, wealth in prison. So when she really thinks about it, she doesn't have a choice in this. She can't be with him. All right. um, so Gatsby goes off to war, and while he's there, Daisy writes him, and she's like frantic to see him because they're still in the early parts of a relationship when proximity is key. You need to be with the person, or you feel like you need to anyway. And she writes about her desire to see him. She wants him to come back. It's because I think she's still in love with him. She's in love with the idea of him, but not being there makes it hard for her to hold on to that. And eventually, she doesn't. Gatsby goes to Oxford, and Daisy meets Tom, and she writes him a letter, and you can only assume it's the breakup letter while he's at Oxford. I wonder if that's why Gatsby doesn't finish at Oxford, because again, his whole life is about becoming good enough for Daisy. And so, now that he's lost her, this throws him off. All right. It might be why he throws himself into crime at this point. He's given up, maybe. We don't get anything about that, though. There's no details really there. Um, so going back to the current time, it says that Gatsby's talking about Daisy, and he says that he wants to believe that Daisy never really loved Tom, but we also see that he's starting to acknowledge that maybe things are a little more complex than he let on, and maybe she did in some way, at least briefly, in whatever way she could. And then we get this really poetic. There's two really poetic passages that let us see the concept of Gatsby's dream has died and what's next. It says the track curved, and now it was going away from the sun, which, as it sank lower, seemed to spread itself in benediction over the vanishing city where she had drawn her breath. He stretched out his hand desperately as if to snatch only a wisp of air, to save a fragment of the spot that she had made lovely for him. But it was all going by too fast now for his blurred eyes, and he knew that he had lost that part of it, the freshest and the best, forever. That's beautiful, so beautiful. And the idea that he's trying to hold on to any piece of this dream, but he now knows it's gone. Now, when you end up in this situation, you got a problem. The dream's dead. So what do? Well, you find a new dream, or you just surrender and give up completely. Gatsby's now in a position of what's his new dream gonna be? And it kind of symbolically fits, and symbolically is the wrong word. We talked about symbolism the other day. He makes a comment about wanting to use his pool, which that's not a big deal, right? I've told you guys before, authors aren't haphazard. There's a reason this detail's there. He wants to go use his pool. He says he hasn't used it all summer, and it's about to be drained today. So this is it. He's going to he wants to use it one time. And we get this idea from this. The Gatsby's never really enjoyed he's been after this goal his whole life, and he's never stopped to enjoy things like his parties, his house, Nick, his friend. It's always been about Daisy. So for once, he's going to do something that's not about Daisy. He's going to go enjoy his pool. It's like we see the glimmer that maybe this guy's going to be okay. And of course, that's brilliant from Fitzgerald, because we know he's not going to be okay. He's about to be anything but okay. All right. And then we get another really, like, one of my favorite passages in the entire book. It's not my favorite, but it's one of. So Nick, the non-judgmental, is about to make a judgment. He's talking to Gatsby. He says, "They're a rotten crowd," I shouted across the lawn. "You're worth the whole blank bunch put together." And he's talking about, of course, Tom and Daisy and that whole crew. And he's telling Gatsby, "You're better than them." He says, I've always been glad I said that. It was the only compliment I ever gave him, because I disapproved of him from beginning to end. Ha ha, did he really? So first he nodded politely, and then his face broke into that radiant, understanding smile, as if we'd been in ecstatic cahoots on that fact the whole time. So remember, we talked about when the very first time we saw him, his smile. Well, here it is. We're bookending Gatsby's life, at least Nick's version of it. When he first meets him, to these are the last words he's going to speak to Gatsby. His gorgeous pink rag of a suit made a bright spot of color against the white steps, and I thought of the night when I first came to his ancestral home there 3 months before. The lawn and drive had been crowded with the faces of those who guessed at his corruption, and he had stood on those steps concealing his incorruptible dream as he waved them goodbye. I thanked him for his hospitality. We were always thanking him for that, I and the others. So really interesting thing about, Gatsby comes off as this kind of benevolent figure as Nick leaves, and we're about to see the end of Gatsby. All right. we get in between it this awkward, oh gosh, the Nick and Jordan stuff is so aggravating. We get this awkward interaction with them. Jordan comes off as like she seems to actually like Nick, which I don't understand. And Nick's just going to blow her off here. He just isn't interested in having a conversation with her. He kind of, we can tell the breakup is coming here, which is going to obviously be strange. Um, we get that Nick tries to call Gatsby. He just senses something's up with Gatsby. He feels bad for him. He can't get through to him. But he calls multiple times and he say the line's being kept open because let's just be honest, Gatsby wants to keep that little window of hope. The movie does a good job of making it seem like he's waiting that for Daisy to call him one last time. But if we're going to combine the two, it's really probably Nick that's calling him. But he's going to get that little bit of hope right before the end. In the movie, in the book, that's not part of it. All right. At this point, we're also, and what we're doing is we're going to get an interlude. We have the Nick and Jordan thing. Then we're going to have this back telling of what happens with George. So we can get George on the scene again. And it's going to give us a little bit of space because some of the way that Fitzgerald worded Nick's last words to Gatsby make it seem like, if you're a close reader, wait a minute, something happened, because it switches to kind of a past tense type thing, and it almost talks about Gatsby like he's gone. So we need this to kind of stew in our brains a little bit. All right. Okay. Then we get this a little more background about how George seems to have how he's feeling after Myrtle's death. This guy Michaelis has come by to kind of calm him down and try to get him some help. George apparently found the dog leash, and they don't have a dog, so he started asking Myrtle about it. And she probably did her Myrtle thing and acted like an idiot and angered George. But George feels bad now. He misses this girl. And he's mad at, he's not mad at her right now. He's under the assumption that the person that hit her, he hasn't connected that these are the two things. Or maybe he thinks they are. I don't really know. But he's decided he's going to find this guy and he's going to, do something about it. Now, as far as we know, all he knows is yellow car. I mean, how is he going to fix that? Despite their cars being a lot more rare in these days, there's no way to go to the internet and Google who has a yellow car in New York. So he's going to have to get some help to do that. And sorry, phone call in the middle of that. Whoever it was is going to have to wait. So let me back up, guys. I apologize for that pause there. Anyway, we know that somehow he gets this information and decides that he's going to go do something about it. Now, we don't know in this chapter how he got the information about how to find Gatsby's house. We will find out later, though. All right, so just hang in there on that note. All right, so anyway, we find out that let me catch my notes again. Sorry, the phone call threw me off. I would just refilm this, but there's no air conditioning in my room right now. I'm wearing this jacket. I'm gonna sweat to death. When George confronts Myrtle about the dog leash, she kind of plays dumb. He grabs her and he takes her to the window and he says that she might fool him, but she can't fool God. And he faces her out and makes her look right at the billboard. Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. So reinforcing that idea that this is supposed to be symbolic for God. All right. So then we get that other passage I told you about the idea about the death of a dream. And that's found around page, sorry, I'm looking at the time here, page 161. And we're talking, this is the last little bit we see of Gatsby. It says, if that was true, he must have felt that he had lost the old warm world, paid a high price for living too long with a single dream. He must have looked up at an unfamiliar sky through frightening leaves and shivered as he found what a grotesque thing a rose is and how raw the sunlight was upon the scarcely created grass. A new world, material without being real, where poor ghosts breathing dreams like air drifted fortuitously about, like that ashen, fantastic figure gliding toward him through the amorphous trees. Ooh, some good words in there. So Gatsby's got this idea here of, how fragile the world is and how much, a dream can be crushed. And you get this image that he's just, maybe there's a little bit of hope that he's starting to realize this and thinking differently. And then you get an ashen, fantastic figure. Well, what do we know about ashes? We know the Valley of Ashes. Who's in the Valley of Ashes? The Wilsons. Well, Myrtle's dead, so who's left? George. And George is walking towards Gatsby at this point. All right, really scary. Then the rest of this is very ambiguously worded. I mean, some of the kids in the AP class even told me they had no clue Gatsby was dead. They had to come back and look at it. But yes, George shoots Gatsby and then shoots himself. And we have a very just like non-climax. This is why you can't call this the climax, in my opinion. There's just no climactic element to it. It just happens, and you're not even sure what happened, to be honest. You do have to do a little bit of detective work here. We get that shots with an S, plural, were fired. So you know that Wilson didn't just go over there and shoot himself. The other thing is, what would that serve? Why would this guy go all the way to the guy he thought killed his wife? Why would he go all that way and just shoot himself? You know, they're obviously he's there to kill Gatsby. We get this image that George's body is found a little ways away from the pool, so it's like he shot him and then walked off and killed himself. We also get the image that the pool itself, there's only small ripples in it, so you got to think if there's a person that's alive and swimming around in the pool, more than small ripples will be seen. So when they come and look, and I think Nick's coming to the house, and when all this happens, he shows up, but they find out at that point that they find Gatsby and George's body dead. All right, and said, now, I want to make an argument for you here, real quick. Yeah, this is sad, right? I don't think it is. I think for Gatsby, this is the happiest ending he could hope for after the loss of Daisy. The happiest ending would be that they run off together and live happily ever after, which just isn't realistic. But now that he's lost the one thing he cared about his entire life, what's he going to do next? Yeah, you see some little glimmers that maybe he's going to look for something new and he's going to maybe enjoy, his fortune now. But Gatsby's a criminal. His whole life is he doesn't really care about the money and stuff. It's always been about getting Daisy. Well, he's not going to get Daisy. What else does he care about? Nothing. So, I mean, what else is he going to do? This is a road to depression and eventual suicide, in my opinion. So Gatsby's spared that. In the movie, they make it look like he's really happy right before he dies, too, because he thinks it's Daisy calling him. So that's an even better thing. He gets to die with a little bit of happiness in his heart, as opposed to this being years later and him being like a broken down drunk who ends up taking his own life because he just can't find meaning anymore. So this is a really cool ending. I don't say cool is the right word. It's a really fitting ending, and it's a very realistic ending, to be honest with you. But there's still some more to deal with. We have to deal with Gatsby's funeral, which is a really sad scene, and just what happens with Nick at the end. We also probably want to see a little bit more about Daisy and Tom. How do they end up? And we have to, not that we want to, see the end of Jordan and Nick, too. So we got a lot still to come. So hang in there. We're going to do chapter 9 after that. And there goes my lights again. That's the second time I've been filming videos where the electricity's gone out. Oh, well. Anyway, guys, thank you for your time. I apologize for the interruptions, like the electricity as well as the phone call in the middle of this. I appreciate you guys being gracious and bearing with me on this. I would love to be able to get home and not have to film all night. So you guys are the best. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful evening.